This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon. So, when I met JZ Delorean, he was our private eye who told stories about being a private eye. He used a pen name. He told gritty stories from the street, from his experience as a private eye. But a funny thing happened on his way to committing acts of journalism. He went to a Lori Pohutsky event after she drew attention to herself by saying she had gotten sterilized in response to Donald Trump being the president. He went to this event, he asked questions, and then he found himself outed in his Livonia community. Not as JZ Delorean, as Jay Murray, hockey dad, father, member of the community, but a guy with the real name who could be really targeted. At that moment, Jay had one of two options. You can hide, except you can't really hide because people already know who you are. People already know what you've done. You've been unmasked. So you could be the defeated luchador who runs off in shame after being unmasked, or you can stand up. You can step up. You can take off the mask and say it with your chest. Jay Murray did the latter. And Jay Murray is my guest today on the Enjoyer Podcast. Jay, welcome in.
I'm glad to have you, or glad to be here, I should say.
Absolutely. So, Jay, you are our first in-person guest on the Enjoyer Podcast. We never like to talk about ourselves, but what do you think about the new digs?
I'm very honored to be here. I didn't realize I was going to be the first in-person guest. I'm honored. I found out after the fact, and I'm stunned, and it's a pleasure to be. And you know I like hanging out with you more than anybody. So.
You probably wouldn't have wanted to do it if you knew you were going to be first. So we had to get the agreement first, and then we fill you in on the details later. Let's start at the very beginning of how I knew you. I don't even think I knew your first name or your real name until a little bit into the project. Tell me about the creation of the JZ Delorean persona.
I made contacts with certain individuals, proletariat journalists in the area, just inadvertently meeting these people, and then got connected to other people, and that was a process that went on for several months. And I was writing things on Twitter, writing things on Facebook, putting things out that might have been, and most of it not very good, but some of it good. And then someone reached out to me and said, "Hey, what do you think of this and that?" And all of a sudden my opinion was being asked for certain things. And so I just kept in that lane. And then finally someone came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to join this project that's going on?" And it was the Michigan Enjoyer Project. And I thought about it for a minute and I got really excited. I thought this is something that's really cool. And I was told I could write about what I wanted to write about, pitch anything, cover whatever I wanted to write about. My ideas and opinions and notions wouldn't be suppressed or anything. And I thought that was just fantastic. And then I got to meet some of the people that were getting involved in the project, and everybody was cool, and I really liked everybody. And so then I just started to figure out, how do I want to do this? And so some of the local media people that I'm friendly with and have contacts with, I was asking them for advice. How should I do this? And two particular guys in general, sort of somewhat famous in the state of Michigan for doing journalism, said, "Jay, you should do this, but you're a conservative. You write conservative things. You have conservative opinions. You should use a pen name because the political landscape is disadvantaged for us." Or for me. And I said, that sounds like a good idea. So then I had to find a pen name or a pseudonym, so to speak. And there is a member of the proletariat media, someone I've been friends with for some time, who I communicate with and throw ideas. He's down in Tennessee, really good guy. And I asked him for ideas, and he came back to me with JZ Delorean. JZ Delorean is obviously John Delorean.
Right. The Michigan auto executive.
The Michigan automaker. His nickname was Stainless Steel because he made, in fact, the famous vehicle that Marty McFly goes Back to the Future in. And so who doesn't love that movie? I love that car. I grew up with a neighbor, someone near me who had one of those cars, and I just loved the car. Who doesn't love that car? It stops traffic. And so the whole notion of JZ Delorean, himself a rebellious guy who went against the grain. Everyone knows his story in Detroit, but most people around the country may not. He was a very rebellious guy who wanted to do it his way and had different ideas. And ultimately, he got ran out of the industry because he couldn't conform to what others thought the auto industry should be. And he had a very loud lifestyle, which I don't. I'm very reserved. But I liked the symbolism that he represented. And so I used that pen name, and I was off to the races. I thought it was cool. I threw that pen name past several people at the Enjoyer, other people, and they thought it was cool.
Did anyone ever actually get the reference?
Nobody did. Not one person.
Well, what do you make of that? I mean, he was a fairly well-known guy. I mean, it'd be like saying, I'm Lee Iacocca, and no one knows what you're referring to. Like, how does that happen?
I think the emergent Gen Z, millennials as well, but specifically young people young people in general. Time, I think, only started for him in 2016. Everything before that seems like everything.
Honest to God, I meet a lot of people who their read on politics, their read on life, their read on culture. It's like they were born when Trump took the elevator ride. Yeah. And nothing before that happened. Nothing exists. Nothing matters.
I've heard other people refer to this as the before times. People. I'm Generation X. I'm creeping up on age 50 soon, and I have vivid recall of the 80s and 90s. I remember all these things. I'm somewhat frustrated that others don't. And to come into contact with millennials and Zoomers and now young teenagers, I'm on the front lines. I have 5 teenagers, so to come into contact with these people, and they have no notion of America prior to 2016,
right?
And so nobody picked up on the JZ Delorean, and there's something we should come back to later on that. Something recently that really blew my mind, specifically about Livonia. But
what is it?
So. Very recently, I'm very dug into the city of Livonia, politically.
Not to be confused with Mike Duggan, who's also from the city of Livonia.
Yes,
go on.
Yes, sir. Buddy of mine cut his grass for many, many years. But at a very recent city hall meeting for the city of Livonia, the mayor, Maureen Brosnan, referenced Field of Dreams in her speech unveiling a new downtown city center, a complete and total restructuring of the city.
Anytime something's premised on if you build it, they will come. Yeah, they're gonna reach in your pocket pretty soon.
But there was an irony to this quote. One of the Field of Dreams ball players, Eddie Seacott, who was depicted in all the movies that have been made about the 2019 White Sox, which have now come to be known through the decades because it's one of the most famous baseball stories of all time. The Black Sox.
Yeah.
Eddie Seacott is a native Livonian. He was one of the first Livonia residents. He's buried in Livonia to this day. His relatives all still live in Michigan. One of the greatest pitchers in the history of Major League Baseball. And when I watched the mayor use this quote, I left that meeting that night and started texting my buddies, hey, does that mean anything to you that the mayor of Livonia used that quote specifically in relation to the city of Livonia? Nobody but one guy, a guy who's at or around my age, who's a baseball fanatic, only one guy knew who I was referring to, and that was Eddie Seacott. So, long story short, that's an item of history that is huge. They've made Oscar-winning movies about the story that this guy's involved in, and people in Livonia who live in the very city he lived in.
Well, that's not the guy Ray Liotta played, so I don't know.
Ray Liotta was Shoeless Joe. But in a very famous movie, 8 Men Out, Eddie Seacott was the main character.
Oh my gosh.
Shoeless Joe was a side character in that movie. The main character was Eddie Seacott, played by David Strathairn, because the entire movie is predicated on his ethical dilemma.
And even within Livonia, this is a native son of the town, and there's been a movie where his name features prominently, not just if you dig into the history, you find he's one of the guys, but he's the main guy in this one, and people still don't know it.
Nobody knows. One guy, a baseball guy who
And you have a sports centric friend group, I imagine. And no one knows it.
Every single one of my buddies is a Turbo Gen X sports normie. All of them. They can tell you every player on every team for all 4 major teams in the area. They're crazy. College sports, everything. You know how guys are. Like,
Absolutely.
we love sports.
Absolutely.
You know, we're romantic about it.
So JZ, you're going around town. It just sounds cool. It's like I like telling people I know JZ, and then you add the Astral DeLorean.
That's why I left the in parentheses on there because I don't want to let go of that name. It's too cool.
It is cool. You're going around. You're doing some great stories. You're telling truths about your community, and then you decide to engage. And not just observe, but engage. What happened at that Lori Pohotsky meeting?
So I have deep contacts in the city government of Livonia, friends who are deeply ingrained into all facets of the city. And she gave that speech, and I immediately felt motivated, like, oh, this is something I got to hunt down. I've got to talk to her. I don't want to do coverage of her without going and talking to her. So I called somebody I knew who had kind of a bead on where she could be, what her activities were in public, no less.
Right.
I don't want to go.
You didn't stalk her down in a parking garage where she's getting out with her kids.
Right. I don't want to go and knock on her door. I don't want to bug her in a grocery store or something like that. Public event where she's going to be speaking to some people. She was, and I don't recall what the event was for. It had something to do with DTE, I believe. She was talking to some voters in Redford about DTE and some other issues associated to that. I went to it. She was there. There were several other people there, and in a very civil manner, I went up to her and told her my name was JZ Delorean, and announced that, I did identify myself with the Michigan Enjoyer and told her exactly why I was there. I'm there to ask her questions about that event. And I was cool about it. I said, I'm not going to ask any questions about your personal medical choices, but I need to know about that speech and why you gave it and what were the motivations behind it. She spoke eloquently and very civilly to me for, it feels like 30 minutes, might have been even longer, closer to 45 minutes. There was no issues whatsoever. She was friendly. She was kind to me. There was no, I didn't get her with any gotcha stuff. And she was cool, and she kept going. And then subsequently, in that event, I had several follow-up questions to her, figuring that she would be like, I'm done. No, she kept going, answering my follow-up questions.
And sometimes asking these questions, guys, is a way of giving someone that chance to speak up, where at any point you can say, look, it's not for me anymore, and that's fine. We don't stalk people. We talk to willing people to talk. That's it. And that's what JZ did that day. So don't get it twisted. He didn't chase this woman down. He talked to her.
Yep. And so everything went great. It was fine. It was so fine, in fact, that I hung around because she was talking about several other things having to do with other political things that were occurring in the state. And so I hung around and listened for the whole thing. It was very comfortable. There was no tension in the room whatsoever. So about an hour and a half, I think, maybe even 2-hour event, I left. I'm gone. And then the next day, I'm getting leaks from people all across Livonia, Redford, Northville that are involved and dug into these sorts of left-wing groups. Hey, man, they're looking for you. They need to know who you are. And so I started getting screen caps of conversations that were going on in various Twitter and Facebook groups. And they were all hunting down. So for about a 24-hour period, give or take, I was privy to these people hunting down.
You're the most wanted man in Livonia for that 24 hours. Holy cow.
They were trying to figure me out. And so I'm watching all this in real time, living my life. I'm taking my kids to their sports events, and my phone's dinging all day long with new stuff. Hey, man, they're getting closer. They're getting closer. They figured out you're Livonia. Someone says they saw you here. Like, just interesting little tidbits they were uncovering. They're
acting like you're freaking Dewan Sims, where there's like sightings that, he was here, he was there.
I know. And so finally, and I'm vague on the time period, but at some point, I believe 24 hours afterwards, it hit. They finally got to somebody within the city of Livonia. Of course, I won't say who, but somebody figured me out and doxed me. Boom. They had me, my name, identified everything
It
about
sounds
me.
like you have reason to believe the information came from a city source, not just from their own digging. Is that what you're saying?
Let me be careful here. It did not come from a city source, but it did come from something adjacent to a city source. Being very careful, delicate here.
Okay.
And but I'm keeping it. I'm a nice guy. I'm an affable guy, and everyone in Livonia who knows me knows that's how I am. I'm not a heavy walker or an angry person in any way. So I'm fine with it. I don't have any ill will towards the individual or individuals who identified me and splashed my stuff out there. I'm totally fine with it. All is forgiven. Immediately after this occurred, I did have a panic attack.
Did you really?
I did freak out for family reasons. I was less concerned with my job as a private investigator or my clients or anything like that. I have very good relationships in that world, and I was less concerned about that. I was more concerned about my wife and kids, my family, and things of that nature. So right after this hit,
What were you concerned about your wife and kids?
Just the way that these things operate. For suburban moms in areas, being associated to a right winger or a conservative can be socially isolating. Never mind being married.
And they know that if they can't get to you, they can get to her. And for a woman to feel ostracized is like the worst thing that could happen to her.
Yeah, and there's that. And I don't want my kids to feel ostracized in school. And everyone knows that there are emergent progressive activists and organizations trying to get into schools and things like that. And then school districts in general are very progressive and liberal. Although Livonia is not but it is there.
It's that one little red dot in Wayne County.
Right.
It's the one place in Wayne County that sends a Republican to the Wayne County Commission.
I know.
It's the one place that where Republicans used to even get elected and sent to Lansing.
So I had concerns, and I will admit, full disclosure, I had a brief panic attack. I went, oh my gosh. So I called
Was the buildup worse? The dinging, or the actual doxing event?
It was you're right. No. You're right. The buildup was worse because I knew at some point somewhere, everyone knows me. When you have teenagers that are all student athletes,
it's literally just a matter of time.
It's just a matter of time. Someone's gonna, get you. So yeah, the buildup was quite intense. And finally, boom, I was out. Then I kind of was like, oh, what am I gonna do now? So again, being careful, I called a mutual friend of both of ours, someone a little bit famous with experience in this, and spent a couple hours on the phone with that person and getting the advisement. And ultimately, my concerns were massaged. Everything was okay. I have another person that works in media at the national level. I called that person, got advisement. And slowly I started to feel like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to come out and it should be fine. And one last call I made, there's someone that operates over on the West Coast that I know in media, and he's a conservative. And I reached out to that person who was doxxed several months ago, and the exact words were, man, it's liberating. I feel better now. Now, to piggyback off that, you said the same words to me, I think about a day after the fact, because I remember reaching out to you and you said, it feels good now being unveiled, doesn't it? And I said, yeah, it's oddly, I'm breathing easier.
Right.
My blood pressure's down.
Right.
Because
when you try to hide something, that's what the world will come after. Because what they're reading from you is that you take it as a weakness.
Yeah.
So we teach people how to treat us, right? And so if you act afraid of something, then that's what the world's going to target in on. And one of my favorite wrestlers, actually an Ohio State guy, used to be, Kyle Snyder, would say, don't protect anything. You know what I mean? Just keep getting better. And so have you found that since being liberated, since being unmasked, Do you write about different things than you would have?
No, everything. In fact, I'm more aggressive now.
Mm-hmm.
Not by intent. It's just happening. Now I'm
Because you have the freedom plus the accrued benefits of practice.
right.
And so you're also developing that confidence in your pen.
Right. Yeah. And now I'm more. But the other thing too. Now I'm out in the open as like technically a member of the press. So that has worked to my benefit now in recent situations with JD Vance, Vice President JD Vance. I got to get into his media scrum in Michigan just by showing up, providing my who I was, getting swept in with the media, and they were able to quickly check me out, vet me. Boom, I'm in the media scrum with ABC News and CNN, and I'm feet away from the vice president.
That's incredible.
And so I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was going under the radar. And so then what I'm sure we'll talk about, the Riley Gaines situation, I was able to get into that and talk to people there. And so it's actually better for what I'm doing. I should if I would have known this, I'd have done it. I'd have never used this pseudonym anyway.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's the only part of this you regret, is ever having felt the need to protect yourself.
Ironically, yes. Yeah. I should have just came right out, and I don't know what I was afraid of.
You were afraid of fallout. Has there been fallout?
None. In fact, this is unusual. I can't believe this actually occurred, but I do have, like anybody does, any conservative has many liberal friends, whether, professionally or personally, these people and you have to interact with them on a daily basis. So I've found that some of my liberal progressive friends actually like some of the stuff I've written, and they enjoy my perspective on things, want my take from the opposite side of the aisle. And because I don't walk heavy, I'm not black-pilled, so to speak, so I'm not hard to deal with. The Lori Pohutsky piece,
Yes.
after I got unveiled, one of the most prominent liberal politicians in the city of Livonia, I won't say who, called me up and said, loved it. Loved it. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, really? And he goes, oh yeah, loved it. It was great.
What do you love about it?
Just the fact that, she's obviously off. I don't think it's controversial to suggest.
I think she told us that through her own actions.
Her politics and her tactics,
her demeanor, her
presence is so far into the fringe on many issues that even normie liberals and Democrats get a little uncomfortable. And it's no longer 2020; it's 2025. So now I think a lot of Democrats that are trying to get things done, that don't have as much of a axe to grind working with conservatives or Republicans, see how her tactics, her politics as a liability. So, of course, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus.
Let me ask you this. It's very odd now that I think about it. It just hit me. So, your House Representative, Lori Pohutsky, your Senator, what's her name? Dana Polehanke, who we have some differing opinions on. I'm a fan of her in my own special way.
No, that's fine.
So we have Pohutsky, we have Polehanke, and then your mayor, this Maureen woman, Maureen Brosnan. What's up with all the girl bosses in Livonia?
It's much like Lansing. It's a female power column in the city of Livonia. I think it just follows the state and national trends that a lot of women Democrats got empowered by the Trump administration in the first term and decided to get in. And I think the HR, human resource, girl boss type aesthetic is more alive and well with women, liberal women, white liberal women, than it is with men. Men are, although men are empowered and activated by politics, I think they are more activated by anger rather than fear. And women seem to me, and I could be wrong when I say this, more motivated by fear. So Trump coming in scared the hell out of them. So then they got motivated to get into politics, and now they're running municipalities, the state, like it's a human resource department. And that girl boss aesthetic, which has now become such a liability politically that,
Girl bosses are the ones who crash the car.
Right.
And it's so funny because I saw in some of the response, to you being unmasked, and you sent me, and some people even mentioned me in that. And what I see among women is this: they like to throw the stone and then hide their hand. They like to, we won this trifecta, this pink wave in 2018. We have a governor, attorney general, secretary of state, all women. Okay. But when that becomes who you criticize, because they hold these positions of power, who the hell else am I going to criticize? Someone who's powerless? Now you're targeting women. What is with that? Why haven't they decided whether they want to be strong and empowered or damsels in distress?
I think liberal Democrats, particularly white college-educated female liberals, more naturally feel like they need to fight City Hall. Them being in power as they are right now at the state and local levels is unnatural for them.
Mm-hmm.
So they are not as good at doing that. They're much better at fighting City Hall and being part of the opposition.
You've never seen Democrats so happy. They were never happy during the Biden years.
They
were not acting like winners. What they love is marching the streets and grievance and
it comes more natural to them.
Yes, that's their sweet spot. That's their happy place.
Being in charge is weird for them. They don't look like they're having fun when they're in charge. Mm-mm. They're uncomfortable. It's an unnatural
They don't get along with each other when they're in charge.
So let's key on that for a moment. Women, as we know, as men who watch closely enough, women don't like each other. Mm-hmm. No matter what their political ideology, mm-hmm. women don't like each other. They fight, they're catty, they get at it. And by the way, women are frustrated with that within each other. You often hear women complain about the lack of tribal mindset within women. They
had to create a new category, the girl's girl,
right,
to try to address this. And anytime, I love to talk about this stuff. Anytime someone is introducing a slogan, that's because the opposite occurs naturally. So see something, say something. That's because your natural inclination is to see something and do nothing. So when people try to say the future is female, they're trying to speak something into existence. They're not talking about what exists on planet Earth.
Correct. I agree with that completely. And as we see over the last several years, some white female liberal politicians cope with the ability of having power differently than others. As we're watching in real time over the last 8 months, and I've tweeted about this, you and I have talked about it on the phone, Gretchen Whitmer is having a very public meltdown. Her behavior is remarkable.
It's incredible.
I don't even have the vernacular to describe it. It's beyond anything I've seen before. It's actually entertaining. I'm enjoying watching it.
What do you make of this? I mean, so 2025 starts, and with the House flipping last year in Michigan, we knew Gretchen Whitmer was a lame duck her last 2 years in office. But I don't think anyone expected it to go quite this badly.
Right.
But I remember talking to you last year before they'd even lost, and you saw signs that Whitmer was spiraling even then. What did you see? What do you see?
So I follow her on Twitter, on all the social media platforms, starting about, and this is a rough estimate, about 9 months ago, 8 to 9 months ago, somewhere in that time frame. I noticed the behavior on her social media became ridiculous, starting to in a slow manner. She's, roughly speaking, I think she's 50, 51, 52, somewhere in that time frame.
Maybe a little closer to 55, well, 53, 50, yeah, 50, 73, 52.
She was showing all the telltale signs of a woman having a midlife crisis. At the tail end
like
of
what?
So she's posting thirst traps. With the come hither look in her eyes. Just weird, bizarre things. You see young women in their 20s do this stuff on social media, or in their 30s. You oftentimes see a woman in her 40s get divorced and start posting this kind of nonsense.
When you see that abundance of selfies or the bad haircut, she can't do the bad haircut because she's still governor, but when you see that oddly short haircut, she's game.
So then
if you're into that, I'm not endorsing.
You started seeing the weird political, tactical errors she was making. The phone call into, I think it was into Delaware, to talk to the Biden administration, which blew up in her face. All sorts of very weird political...
The Dorito communion.
The Dorito
the
thing.
Hot mic with Kamala Harris. I mean, just...
Everything got weird. And then, by the way, those are instances that taken in connection to or in the context of her social media activity, it was the most bizarre stuff I'd ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So then she has the interview with her husband, with that Lansing reporter. And it was so obvious something's clearly wrong
It didn't seem like they knew each other. It seems like Tim Skubic grabbed two people on the street in Lansing and said, let's record a bit. You guys are going to act like you're married, and I'm going to interview you as if you're the first couple of Michigan.
Yeah, and it was so obvious just watching 5-10 minutes of that interview, like, oh, something's wrong. They're lit. And then your mind starts wondering, like, this is a woman possibly in a midlife crisis, and it's really going weird for her, and she's pretending to be like she's 28 years old. And so that's kind of, now it's getting worse because now she has nothing to do. So
she has nothing to do.
You know.
And I thought there might be, it's a shame, Jack Kevorkian's not around anymore. I thought we might see a death with dignity with Whitmer. Instead, she's gone. I mean, I thought it was bad enough. So this lady goes to D.C. last Wednesday, for what was going to be her launch pad to the national stage, which the 24 campaign that didn't happen wasn't. The memoir that nobody bought and nobody read, and now there's a child's version, wasn't. All those late night appearances weren't. This was going to be it, that big speech. And then Trump says, oh, okay, see you're in town.
Come to the White House.
You say you would like to work with me. Come by the White House. Why don't you swing by the White House on your way out? What are you going to say, no? After telling the world that you'd like to work with the president? And so to be roped into that environment. I mean, last week there was a point when if you searched Gretchen Whitmer, one of the search options was Trump. Gretchen Whitmer Trump.
I know.
Which is not what you want. So it's bad enough he invites you in. He says nice things about you. Half the Republicans freaked out before realizing what he was doing. The Democrats are still freaking out over that. And then days later, we see the binder hiding her face. And Jay, I got to say, man, when I first saw that in the group chat, I thought, A, this is probably Patriot Post Girl having a joke. And B, it's not her best work. You know what I mean? Like, oh, just put a binder. And then I saw it was real. And I love Patriot Post Girl. I wish it had been her. But what did you think when you saw it? That is Michigan's face to the rest of the world.
So
and she's hiding her face.
There's a couple things completely wrong with that. The poor political skills are remarkable. So she's the governor of a Midwest state. She has political aspirations in 2028. Whether progressives and high-heeled liberals like it or not, the Democrat Party is going to shift a little bit before 2028, and it's going to get pulled to the center a little bit. It's going to happen. They call it the wilderness years. This occurred back prior to Bill Clinton.
Absolutely. That's what Bill Clinton saved them from.
Yeah. So the Democrats are, whether they like it or not, are going to shift in some way. Who better to shift that than a Midwestern governor from a manufacturing state? It's a smart Democrat with good political skills and good political capital could have played that very well, because normie voters don't really freak out when a Democrat and a Republican have to do things together, particularly in the Midwest.
They get that. And her whole pitch as governor in 2018 was her ability to be bipartisan.
Right.
Then Trump wins and she leans back into that.
Right.
She tried to be the super leftist, didn't really work. She really, in a sense, got along better with Republicans.
She would have won a lot of points if she stood there with a smile on her face and played the game. And
she could have stole that environment. That was a possibility. What would Trump have wanted to do in that situation? Steal it.
Oh, yeah. Imagine, this is just a hypothetical. Imagine a John Fetterman who it could be, say, make John Fetterman governor of Michigan, and Trump invites Fetterman to that White House. You're going to see Fetterman there, and it's going to be a gong show, and it's going to be great. And Fetterman's going to be trying to steal it from Trump. Trump's going to be trying to steal it back from him. And then the quips and the things going back and forth. And you're going to see him take a group pic hugging. And then you're going to see pictures of Fetterman hugging Trump and putting his arm like this. Like they're going to be having fun with it. And then on the outset, they're going to be shooting tweets at each other. Embroiling up more engagement and things like that.
Yeah, when he headlocked me, I could tell Fetterman was musty. Like, then that's when you go after. You do the nice show, and then you go after and you give your fans what they also want to.
Exactly. And because Whitmer is a high-heeled liberal, and she's affluent, and that's fine, that's good, that's not a criticism. But she doesn't realize that UAW guys working on the line aren't exactly... left-wing commies or affluent white-collar libs. Those are guys who are maybe our default libs, but they'll vote Republican if they're angry.
The Trump Democrat.
And they like to get in their gun. They like to get in their trucks and they go up north and hunt. They do things that a lot of normie red pill types do. Most of those guys, most union workers are red pilled anyway, particularly in Macomb County and stuff like that. They got voters like that, which are, broadly speaking, a very large demographic in Michigan. They don't have a problem with a Democrat and a Republican being in a picture together and doing something that might have some symbolism or hearken to some sort of like support for Michigan. People like that aren't going to freak out. The partisans will. The people
the Keith Olbermann, of course.
Yeah,
but you scroll his timeline and Keith gets that mad about DoorDash order coming late. He's always mad.
Right.
You have to be able to discount that and know who matters in 2024 and 2025. And whatever happens, you have to be courageous in the choice you've made.
Right.
And that visceral display of a lack of courage, of whether it's not wanting to be photographed, not wanting the heat from the left, it just strikes me as something a woman would do.
If I'm a Democrat and Trump asked me to come to the White House, I know I'm going into an enemy environment. I'm going into that office and I'm having fun. And I'm doing something that'll get my picture.
What would Gavin Newsom have done? Tried to steal it. He might not have successfully done it.
And I'll tell you right now, you'd get Gavin Newsom and Trump in a photograph together, both of them smiling, Newsom with that psychotic smile. And then you'd get clips and clips of them busting each other's balls, laughing at each other, all sorts of stuff. Newsom would have played that perfectly.
Good piece of business for all involved.
Right.
And instead, what we have is 10 million people. I have plenty of followers of Big Gretch, in my following. I'm not hearing pushback anymore.
No, they're pissed at her.
I'm not seeing defenses mounted anymore.
No. I think, some of them, the very, very partisan ones, are pissed at her. The ones who voted for her and are default Democrat types, they're just like, oh God, like they're disappointed, and they know that picture looked like ass. So.
Jay, I gotta ask, one of my absolute favorite TV shows. You've seen it, Cheaters.
I've seen it.
Is Cheaters real?
No. 100%
How can you tell?
Well, first of all, it's not that it's not real. What you're watching is happening, but it's been manipulated and structured to occur in a way that some of it's performative, some of it is, for example, like they catch the cheating at the restaurant and they know ahead of time that person's going to be there with the woman, and always the opposite sex. Sometimes it's back and forth, male or female cheating, boyfriend or girlfriend. But it's too perfect. The camera's already set up in the restaurants. They already know things are. The real world doesn't occur that nice and tight. And then the second thing too is, and I know these people sign NDAs and they sign off to have this done and to look like circus, to look like idiots on TV, idiots doing idiot things. It is kind of. I would never get involved in any of that. It's highly unethical. You're filming under the auspices that it is real, possibly, maybe a kernel of it is real. You're filming someone's trauma. it's possible that the person that's there, that's just the cheatee, I guess you could say, or the person who is getting cheated with, they're just caught in. You don't know what that person knows or doesn't know, and then they're on camera, and it can't be real if they're all signing NDAs and putting their faces on TV. Sometimes it's blotted out, but sometimes it's not. Like I just
because wouldn't everyone just deny?
Yeah,
just deny the permission. And then it's kind of like if they give the permission, it almost makes it seem like they're in on it. To give you, it's funny you asked me that because reality TV. I know that reality TV started about 24 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, right around the Y2K. Absolutely.
I've never been able to watch any of it. I've never been able to watch Dog the Bounty Hunter. A guy with a felon who can't even carry a firearm, and he's running around with pepper spray, getting nonviolent drug offenders and taking them in, and then they pick them up, and then you got to listen to 10 minutes of the dog trying to convert the drug user to Christianity as they drive him to the.
Jesus,
it's just ridiculous. And not only that, here's the worst part about it. Here's what drives me crazy. If you're doing investigative work, or you're a bounty hunter, or you're working in any industry that operates in my lane, discretion and being discreet is the ultimate superpower. If I'm dressed like a Hell's Angel guy with Hulk Hogan hair, and I'm driving around with a team of 4 or 5 SUVs and camera crews and everything, how discreet can you be when you're trying to sneak up and do these sorts of...
That's walking heavy, like you were talking about.
Yeah, but hence the reason why what he's doing is questionable, and I know he's done well and he's successful doing it. I don't know anything about him. I've never met him. Oddly enough, he was looking for private investigators online years. I forget the name of it. Is it Patetto or Pacetto? The lady that went missing down in Florida. Anyways, he got involved in that, and he was looking for one of the people involved in that, and he had an ad out, I think, or he was asking for private investigators. It looked like it. I saw some sort of ad flying out. I don't know if it was his, but it was aligning it was kind of asking people to come down and look for. And I don't know how real it is. It just seems kind of fraudulent. I know he's a real licensed bounty hunter, or whatever corporation he runs or currently is running. I don't know if he's still in operation. I know that's licensed. He's got to be licensed to be operating. So it's not. What he's doing is not fake, but it's just hard to watch because there's so much fake to it, So there are real bounty hunters in this world. They're just going about their day. They work in every urban city, and they're bail bondsmen, and they're going around and getting drug offenders typically that miss their court dates, and they get pulled back into court.
You ever see the movie Jackie Brown?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, Max Cherry.
Max Cherry, by the way, is a perfect example. It is dolled up and glitzed up for being a movie, but he's a reserved, very a Max Cherry type, and he's not really portraying a private investigator in that show. He's a bail bondsman. But if you notice, his entire character is predicated on he could walk through a mall when a heist is going on and no one even knew he was there.
Absolutely. Beige spot on a beige wall.
That's being discreet. And so from that standpoint, Max Cherry would be a good example of somebody who is kind of depicted as a real representation of what an investigator or a bail bondsman would be doing. Just very low, under the radar. No one even knows they're there. Almost like a ninja, So the very opposite of what Dog the Bounty Hunter does. So, by the way, it's funny you mentioned that. I love that movie, and I love Max Cherry. He's one of my favorite characters. Rest in peace to Robert Forster.
Great character. So, Jay, I'd also like you to take a look at this. So, this is a New York Post video report. They went to Thomas Crooks's hometown, the man who tried to assassinate Donald Trump, and here's what they found. So whenever you see something notable, say something, or I'll say something. We'll stop the video and we'll go from there.
Was Thomas Crooks, the would-be assassin of Donald Trump, part of a larger criminal network?
There were others in helping, assisting.
We talk about the Trayvon Martin
and
hoodies they were wearing.
And does one private investigator's claim of an electronic device still pinging at his old high school have any merit or implications? Plus, those close to Crooks say public narratives about him are all lies.
It still baffles me now.
My findings in Western Pennsylvania almost 8 months later, right now.
We were going to try to have Dana Kennedy
On July
on, but just couldn't
13,
make the Zoom
2024,
work.
a seemingly mild-mannered college kid almost altered the course of human history when he shot Donald Trump at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. But to friends, neighbors, former teachers, and investigators, why Thomas Crooks did what he did is just as much of a mystery now as it was back then. Videographer Matt McDermott and I spent a week in Butler, Pennsylvania and nearby Bethel Park in a sometimes wild journey to find out what really happened. After all these months, the trail is as cold as the ground that you see in front of me. The motive remains unknown. Why? What we found shocked us. Even though Thomas Crooks killed one rallygoer, Corey Comparator, and seriously injured two others while grazing Trump's right ear, there's a lot of sympathy for him in his hometown of Bethel Park. Several people told us they don't think Crooks acted alone and that he might have been a patsy. Some also accused Biden's FBI of suppressing some information, like why Crooks's body was cremated so quickly and what his overseas encrypted accounts revealed. Private investigator Doug Hagmans had a team of 7 working on this mystery after being hired by a secret client shortly after the event. He says his team used a technique called geofencing. Hagman told me they located 8 or 9 devices, probably cell phones, that belonged to other people, but were pinpointed to being with Crooks at his home, at his old high school, at his gun club, and even at the rally. Hagman said he doesn't believe Crooks acted alone and that he was part of a criminal network that's still out there and still wants to kill President Trump.
Yeah, I'm going to say that I think there is sufficient evidence to support the conclusion that there were others in assisting Thomas Matthew Crooks, based on the presence of electronic devices at his home as well as at the Butler Fairgrounds.
But to all his neighbors, Thomas Crooks seemed like a regular teenager.
I mean, he seemed like a normal kid. He seemed nice enough. He'd wave and smile, every day he'd be out walking around. So it's not like he was like a shut-in or anything like that, Seemed like a very normal teenager.
Everyone we spoke to pushed back on the narrative at the time that painted Crooks as a Columbine-type loner who wore camo to school, was bullied, and even supposedly threatened to shoot up his school once. They told us that was all false. Crooks's former guidance counselor, Jim Knapp, knew Crooks and his parents and older sister since he was in 9th grade.
Do you remember where you were when you heard the news?
Sure did.
That Thomas Crooks had tried to kill the person who had become the president of the United States?
Sure did. And it was like, are you kidding me? I said, this kid I would have never, ever thought would have attempted this or never would have done this.
Crooks's former computer technology teacher, Xavier Harmon, was one of many who told us Crooks was not only a very gifted student, but a nice kid. Harmon said he called Crooks, quote, his little buddy.
I didn't believe it. I know the individual I taught and this individual, this picture there, presenting of somebody who was a total 180 of who he was in my classroom.
His Bethel Park high school friend said you can never really know anyone, but still said he was shocked at learning what his old economics classmate did.
This kid that I played football with, sent me a message. He was like, do you know Matthew Crooks? And I was like, no. And he was like, oh wait, Thomas Matthew Crooks, you graduated with him, right? I was like, yeah, what about him? And he was like, that's who tried to assassinate Trump. I was like, get the heck out of here, dude. It still baffles me now.
He went to the gun range 43 times in the year prior to shooting Donald Trump. 43 times to the Clairton range. Did he ever talk about that kind of hobby before shooting?
No, I would have never taken Tom for a gun person, to be honest. He seems more of the hang out and play video games type of person.
But those were the people who spoke to us. Many did not. Thomas's parents still live in the very small ranch home in Bethel Park, but have never given interviews.
I'm standing right in front of the Crooks home where Thomas Crooks grew up. His parents, Matthew and Mary, are inside now. They were inside yesterday. Apparently, they never come out of their house except at 3 a.m. to go get the groceries. This according to a number of neighbors.
Crooks's older sister, Katie, lives in an apartment complex nearby, but good luck getting to her.
Behind me is the apartment building where Katie Crooks, Thomas Crooks' only sibling, lives. She's about 23 years old. She works as a janitor nearby. And when we went to see if we could talk to her, we were met by two men in her apartment building complex that came to the door and told us in no uncertain terms that we had to go. They were polite, but they said, and I quote, "This story is dead, and you need to know that."
We also visited the gun club where Crooks practiced an astonishing 43 times between August 2023 and the Trump rally in July 2024.
We are right now rolling up to the Clairton gun range. This is a gun club and a shooting range about half an hour from Thomas Crooks' house. And he went once in May, 2 months before the attempted assassination of President Trump. And the day after, oddly enough, there were officers, agents from the Department of Homeland Security that were here shooting as well.
Louisiana Congressman Clay Higgins told us, however, that he's pretty sure Crooks acted alone.
So the day after the shooting, there were people in there shooting. Okay, there's a couple different things that could be. So Butler, PA turned for about a 48, 72-hour period was like the center of the world. That could have been just off-duty guys doing training while they were in there. So I'm estimating there was probably about 200, 300 federal LEO in that area, and they're working shifts. So they were probably like, let's go shooting or keep our, skills sharp off duty. So my first impulse is to think that might not be that big of a deal. I'm pretty sure in the middle of nowhere, PA, there's not a whole team.
That might be the place where you go.
Yeah, because where else are you going to go? And you're in the middle of nowhere, and there's not an entire... there's not that many federal LEO guys just moving around in that city on day to day. That doesn't pique my concern too much. It's how many.
What about the amount of times?
43 in a year is unusual because it's not cheap to go shooting. With ammo, if you're going that many times with ammo, you're spending a lot on ammo. You're spending a lot on range time. We don't know how long he was in the range. It doesn't specify how long he was in the range for. We don't know if he was there for 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. That can have that can the longer you go, obviously, the more expensive it is. But either way,
so you get range time, and then you're shooting through more bullets as well.
Yeah, and ammo is very expensive. So 43 times in a year that's basically a little less than once a week. And
you saw the house he lived in.
Yeah, if he's going once every 10 days, let's just roughly estimate it at once every 10 days he's going. Or 12 days he's going. That's a lot of money in ammo that he's firing out. And again, we don't know how long he was on the range. If he's going for an hour each time, that could be expensive. $24, $30 every time he goes. Anywhere between $15 to $30 if he's going to go for 30 minutes or an hour. Then he's shooting, he could potentially shooting another $60, $70 worth of ammo each time he goes. Ammo's not cheap.
Where does a kid like that get that kind of money?
He's got if he doesn't have a job, it does make you wonder where did all that money come from. Real quick, pause it real quick.
Yeah.
Myself, a lot of my buddies, we're all shooters, all gun owners. And we like to go to the range, and it's fun. And you and I have gone together, and we've had a great time. It's not cheap. Range time, if you got a bunch of guys going all on one lane, that can negate the cost, but then you're still shooting a ton of ammo. And ammo is not cheap.
That's the thing. So basically, no matter how you slice it, it's not cheap. There's not a cheap version of it.
Right. So he would have to have a really good money flow. Now, maybe he's living at home, so he's not paying rent.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he doesn't have a car payment. Maybe we don't know if he had a really old 20-year-old car with no car payment that maybe a lot of people drive with no insurance on their car.
Absolutely. Or, you get a full-time job, and, that's plenty of money for a kid that age, especially if you don't have any obligations.
But let's back up and just think about this from this standpoint. That is just unusual to go that often. Normal people don't go to the range that regularly.
Mm-hmm.
You go with your buddies once a month. Maybe you go, maybe one of your buddies buys a firearm and he's like, hey, I've never been shooting before. And everyone goes, let's go shoot. And or someone like, for example, a bunch of guys are going because someone's turning 50, and then you get a bunch of 4 or 5 guys going, and then they go and grab dinner afterwards. It's not a regular
it sounds
thing.
like an occasion. It sounds like an occasion. Like, what would you think of someone who every 10 days was like, let's go shoot?
And if you're going every 10 days shooting, everyone in that range would know you. You'd be a regular.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone would know you by your first name. They'd know everything about you. You'd be friends with everybody in there.
Mm-hmm.
Even regulars don't go that frequently.
So this is irregular.
I think it's irregular. You don't see that. That often. There are regular shooters. There are people that like to go frequently and often. Typically, it's older people.
When I spoke to Brendan at Great Lakes Gun Rights, he doesn't go shooting that often.
Yeah,
this guy's a gun activist,
right?
And doesn't go shooting as often as a hobbyist.
I'm very friendly. I won't say his name on this, but he's going to be listening to this, and he knows who you and I are. Big fan of yours. There's someone who's a weapons guy here in Michigan. He's also a writer, and he's written some great novels. And he is probably the biggest gun nut I know. Knows everything about guns. He's a former police officer, and just it's not just his hobby; it's his job. And he doesn't go nearly that often. You know what I mean? He just doesn't. And this is a guy who has his own web show and shoots and does all these things and does reviews for guns and all these and travels all over the country.
How does that compare to how often law enforcement might use a gun range?
Law enforcement typically has their own ranges that they go to, and
that's something I did find weird about this. It's like you would think you wouldn't want federal agents mixing in with normal people like that.
Right, but and that is weird, and there's no way to explain that other than from my vantage point. You got a ton of guys in there having to work for the next week doing investigations, and maybe 10, 15
blow off
of them
some steam.
Decide to go shoot. That's the only thing I can account for why there'd be that many federal LEO in Butler, PA, in the middle of nowhere. Now, aside from that, that is unusual. If that's not the reason, then that's unusual. Now, there probably is police officers or county sheriffs that work in Butler, PA, that may very likely go there to shoot.
Right.
Here, as an aside, here in Metro Detroit, for example, I believe it's the Detroit Police. They have their own gun range. Livonia has their own gun range. They have their own places. Now, off-duty officers oftentimes, or retired officers, will go to various ranges in the area, like Action Impact or Huron Valley or places like that. But a lot of these police departments have their own range, And
that's even local police. So even if you were a federal officer, you probably would be welcome at the local range, I imagine.
You probably wouldn't say you're a federal, but they probably know.
No, I'm saying how do you think that would go if I'm with Homeland Security, I roll into Livonia PD, I'd like to use your gun range. Would you say that's typical or atypical?
That would be. Well, I couldn't even speak to that. I'm guessing it's not often, and I'm also guessing it's not often that 15 or 20 of them roll in all together on the day after. That's whether there's a good explanation for that, I don't know. I'd just be speculating, but I think, in my opinion, I think it's because they were all there working and they didn't know when they were going to get out of there.
That makes a lot of sense.
You know.
That makes more sense.
You had an advance team allegedly there was an advance team in Butler, PA, 2-3 days prior. So you probably had federal LEO Secret Service agents that were there, Department of Homeland Security people. I know there was DHS there on site. You can tell when you watch videos, you can tell which ones are DHS. They might have been there for 4 or 5 days.
How can you tell?
I think the guy standing behind the Secret Service agents with the long gun was DHS. He was not Secret Service, I don't think. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert. And I've also had people...
Right, because Secret Service guard the body.
Yeah.
DHS shoot the guy.
I've also had sources tell me that multiple DHS were there that day who would know. You know what I mean? I don't know how many, but I think the guy with the long gun behind Trump when they were pulling him off was a member of DHS. So,
what do you think about this geofencing data, the cell phone data?
So that's confusing me because geofencing is a big hobby, as you might have heard. A lot of people do it in Michigan. It's a game. There's geofences. There's geofence capsules all over Metro Detroit. There's probably about 2,000 of them positioned all over, probably just within this Metro Detroit area, Southeast Detroit. They're everywhere. A lot of the people that like are hide and seek types love that stuff. In Livonia, they have their own geofencing group that does it.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Wow.
So if they're I was unaware that you could geofence another phone in that same way. It's quite possible. So they're geofencing phones that are in close proximity to his at various locations over the city. Over what time frame? I wasn't clear.
Yeah.
But I don't know how exact that is, because if he's at a school, everyone in the school is going to have a cell phone, so he's going to be pinging off several other people in the school that are going to be in close proximity to him at various stages through the day. So, for example, if he's doing geofencing with our phones, it's going to ping next to each other today because we're talking to each other. So I don't know what that says.
And it sounds like what they were trying to say is like there was multiple locations where that happened, right?
He was moving around.
Yeah. Multiple at the fairgrounds, multiple at this, multiple at the school.
So he might have been going to that fairgrounds multiple times he had to have. He had to have gone to the fairgrounds multiple times prior to that day to
Scout it
out. And there's been rumors, and I don't know if this is true or not, that on the day of, he climbed up there and had with him a rangefinder. I've heard something to that effect. That's been reported out, in addition to his rifle. So that would indicate that that he needed to have, he knew prior to going up there he would need to have some sort of tools with him to figure out range other than just a scope. That's not confirmed. I've heard that reported, but again, I haven't looked at any investigations or I haven't seen any official documents, but it's been reported by other news sources that a rangefinder was in play with him. So that's interesting. That would indicate he knew he needed it beforehand. But that whole thing is unusual as well. The fact that no one could get up there, I don't know.
Absolutely.
He investigated the incident for months as part of a bipartisan congressional committee, but he admitted to me that he still hasn't found a motive. Higgins hopes the new FBI director, Kash Patel, will help him find out more about Crooks in the coming months. But the people we spoke to said they don't believe the mystery of why Thomas Crooks did what he did will ever be solved.
Why did he do it? I said why I thought, and I really to this day believe it. Evil. From time he left high school to 2 years later, something happened to that young man during that time frame. And I'm a firm believer, and as we talked earlier, Dan, about my current job in the religion, I believe evil is in the world. The devil has hit the world.
Can we pause it there?
Absolutely.
So he's saying it's just pure evil, and that's a common assessment. But so he's a young man.
He also said something happened.
Something happened, and I'll tell you what I think happened. Speculation. These young men today are on so many behavioral modification drugs for mental illness or for depression.
And he looked like a prime candidate.
Very much so.
Looking at him, it reminded me of Ethan Crumbly.
He had the telltale signs of being an incel, who may have been antisocial. Again, I don't know him, but he carried the aesthetics of someone that might have been a loner in school, all those things. It's very likely he had depression. Home life, just judging by what we've looked at here, home life probably didn't look too great. Low income, rural area. He might have had a rough childhood. He might have had a troubled home life. A small, if any, social circle, maybe no social circle friends to rely on, to lean on, and maybe he was online too much, but we don't know if he was online. He didn't have many social media accounts, but we don't know. But the something he's referencing, something happened. How many times are we finding out that these young adult men or young boys have mental issues, and there's always behavioral modification drugs in play, or whatever it is?
I want to see his medicine cabinet.
Yeah.
I want to see his medicine cabinet, and I have to think it would look a lot like Ethan Crumbly's.
I have to think it would look like a pharmacy, of various prescriptions, mixed in with probably, illegal drugs too, because young people like to smoke weed and then use, and weed's not a very serious drug, but he could have been mixing in other things too. He's in a rural middle of nowhere anyway. Meth is huge in those areas. Methadone. I mean, the list goes on and on. I know we're speculating here, but young male, incel, troubled home life, possibly unemployed, very few options where he's at, very little options for upward mobility, financially depressed.
But is presented with a chance to get his name in a history book.
And no mention of a girlfriend. That's huge. Very huge. When men get girlfriends, and it pulls them into a social norm, because then you have to operate in different ways. I've got a girlfriend.
You can't embarrass her.
You can't embarrass her. You got to get a job because she likes to do things. And then, rural areas, she might be talking, like if she's 21, 22, 23, hey, we should...
Oh, she's wanting to settle down. She's not just wanting to date at that point. Absolutely.
Right. So having a girlfriend is a significant social norm that can pull a person into Normieville. Whereas if you're single...
It's like the Bible. The one thing in the creation story that God describes as not good is Adam being alone.
Right.
The one thing, everything, the lights were good, the animals, the seas. Adam being alone, not good.
Young unemployed, unmarried men with no girlfriends, no options,
nothing to do but the shooting range,
and idle hands, and then and depression, and then the black pill, and then that's a recipe for disaster.
And then Trump as Hitler. You don't even need MS Ultra anymore. Or MK Ultra. Just turn on MSNBC.
Right.
It comes in over the airwaves. You don't need to be brainwashed.
Right.
It's on TV 24/7.
Right.
And I want you to notice, because a similar language is going to come before the end too.
Really inflicted him, caused him to snap.
And that picture creeps me out.
His teacher, Xavier Harmon, wants to remember his old student, not the scary young man he read about in the media after the shooting.
I just want everybody to understand who Thomas really was and the individual that I know. The monster that's being created isn't the individual that sat there for 2 years in my classroom. So I'm going to focus in my heart and my mind to always remember that young man.
All right, so pause it real quick again.
That's it.
So the public school officials, teachers, guidance counselors, we've got two now that are using very similar vernacular to describe something happened, he became something. So these are adult males. Both these men that are public school employees that knew him at a certain point are both roughly the same age. They look like they're over the age of 50, 55. So, and they're using language that almost inherently they know instinctively something happened. Something changed. Something got to him. There was I think that's quite obvious. Men that are older see a shift in behavior or body language or things that in younger people, we instinctively reach for, something happened, something happened, you know. So, I don't know, but go ahead.
No, that's what I saw too, is that something happened. And for them to create it or was created, it just sounds like somebody got inside of his mind between the end of high school and when he shoots that gun. And, you know, I think it's kind of notable. I haven't heard about any diaries, any manifestos, any text messages, anything. And also, as a private eye, are you shocked that we've had Kash Patel in for a while? We've had Trump in for quite a while at this point. You haven't heard a scrap of new information about Thomas Crooks. What do you make of that?
It's possible they're investigating it. It's possible they're reinvestigating it.
Is it possible they're so far behind that they're not investigating it?
They have a lot to chew on. They're doing a lot. I've heard it referenced on a mainstream podcast with a bunch of pundits that what we see the Trump administration and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and all these people doing is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole lot more going on behind the scenes. So it just could be that they're busy and they've got too much going on. Also, keep in mind this too. It took Kash Patel a long time to get confirmed. He didn't. He was one of the last ones. So he's only been in the job a short time, even though Trump's been in since mid or late January.
So he's not quite cooking yet.
He's not quite cooking yet, but also keep this in mind too. Kash Patel, in my opinion, he's running a different agency than the DOJ. The DOJ, and this is true for Democrat and Republican administrations, the DOJ likes headlines, to do headlines, press conferences, all that stuff. The FBI has to conduct investigations, and they don't talk about what they're doing until they get somewhere, and then we find out. But if you're doing an investigation, you don't want anyone knowing about it, and oftentimes you're doing it very discreetly. So you oftentimes, and you probably know this when you're chasing down a story. I've run into this a lot. I ran into this on the Devereaux story in Canton. We're still investigating. We have no comment yet. You know, it's an open investigation.
Ongoing investigation. Absolutely.
Investigation. They don't like to speak on things because they might finish and be in a different place than they are today, and nobody wants to stick their head out. Also, that's another reason for that too, is a neurotic safetyism. Everyone's covering. No one wants to speak out or say anything. You know, just especially
if you don't get authorization. Absolutely.
Public sector employees across the board, they don't like to speak out. They'll talk to you off the record. Don't use my name. You know, but yeah. So I think we may find out more, you know, as we move forward. You know, plus Kash was busy, and Kash wanted to see Ovechkin get that goal. So he's been busy, you know. He'll get to it, I think, you know.
I hope so.
I think, by the way, an investigation like that would be different, and it would take much more nuance, and it would be a much longer, broader investigation, because they're not just investigating that situation. They're investigating Secret Service agents. They're investigating other FBI agents. What Kash has an extraordinary heavy lift that I think needs to be recognized by a lot of Republican voters I want something done now. Lock this person up now. We need this done now, and we need this corrected now. What Kash is doing, and again, this is just my opinion, he's got so much of a heavier lift. He's got to operate in an agency that is alien to him, may not even like him. And he's got to deal with all these factors, cooperative FBI agents. You'll notice when he first came in, that first 2 weeks he was in, you probably saw in the news that a lot of office agents that were running offices in various countries were systemically fired. He's got to get new people in. He's got to do all these things to get these investigations going. This is all me speculating.
Tough job, absolutely.
It explains why he's got a slower, more nuanced job, though.
Absolutely.
Anyways.
Jay, great stuff, great conversation. And so, yeah, read JZ Delorean, read Jay Murray's work. It's important stuff. And just know that were your name to get out, I hear from some of you guys on Twitter are so worried about being doxxed and being unmasked. All you have to fear is fear itself at this point. We're not the colonials where, Great Britain would view you as a traitor if you spoke the truth. This isn't even a century ago where people trying to reject a union card and assert the right to work might cost you your life. The worst you have to fear is just some mean tweets. And all the good stuff is on the other side of that fear. So, Jay, I want to thank you for taking the time. Appreciate you, brother.
It's a pleasure, man. I love you.